My dad handed me a locked case and said, "Hide this from your husband." I laughed, until my husband started searching our house and whispered, "This is why I control the money." I thought there had to be some normal explanation. Maybe old family jewelry. Maybe something from my grandmother. Then he opened it. Inside were gold coins and a few small gold bars, wrapped and stacked neatly. Not pretty jewelry. Just cold, solid money. I stared at it and said, "Dad, what is this?" He said, "It's yours now." I didn't touch it. My dad, Wayne, was not the kind of man who did secret things. I asked why he was giving it to me like we were doing something wrong. He looked at me and said, "Because you don't have money your husband can't touch." I hated the way that sentence hit me, mostly because it was true. My husband, Russell, handled everything. Bills, savings, mortgage, insurance, taxes. Russell had a way of making control sound like concern. If I bought coffee before work, he reminded me how fast small purchases added up. I started checking prices before I wanted things. Then one Thanksgiving, Russell embarrassed me in front of my whole family over a pair of boots. They were $95. My mom had given me birthday money, and I used part of it. That was all. But Russell saw the box by the door and said, in front of everyone, "We're trying to build a future here, not play dress up." The room went quiet. My sister Brooke looked like she wanted to say something, but I shook my head because I knew what would happen later. If anyone criticized Russell, he wouldn't yell. He would go cold. Hours of silence. Short answers. Heavy sighs. Then somehow I would end up apologizing for making things awkward. My dad didn't say anything that night. He just watched me. Later, when Russell stepped outside, my dad asked, "Do you have money he doesn't control?" I laughed because I was embarrassed. I said, "Dad, it's not like that." He said, "That's not what I asked." I told him no. Then I defended Russell. I said he wasn't a monster. I said marriage wasn't supposed to have secret money. I said hiding anything would be a betrayal. My dad nodded, but he looked sad. A few months later, he called and asked me to stop by after work. He said he had something from my grandmother Rose. She had passed away a while before, and most of her things had already been divided, so I thought maybe he found a letter or some old jewelry. Instead, he took me into the garage, shut the door, and gave me the case. I told him I couldn't accept it. He said, "You can. And you will." I told him Russell would be furious if he knew. I said hiding something like this would prove every bad thing Russell had ever said about me being careless or sneaky with money. My dad didn't raise his voice. He just said, "If Russell is the man you keep defending, you'll never need it. If he isn't, you'll be glad you have it." Then he said the sentence I still hear when I can't sleep. A woman should not have to ask permission to survive. I hated that sentence. I hated how dramatic it sounded. I hated that accepting the case felt like admitting something was wrong in my marriage. But I took it. I drove home with the case on the floor of my passenger seat, covered by an old reusable grocery bag. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. Every traffic light felt too long. When I got home, Russell was in the living room watching a game. He barely looked up and asked why I was late. I said traffic was bad. He said, "Traffic from your dad's is never bad unless you stop somewhere." That was how he did it. Not a full accusation. Just a hook dropped into the room. I said I didn't stop anywhere. He looked at me for a second, then went back to the TV. I carried the case upstairs inside my work bag and hid it in a storage tote full of winter decorations in the guest room closet. My heart was beating so hard I felt sick. I kept telling myself I wasn't stealing. I wasn't betraying him. But it still felt like I had crossed a line. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. And somehow everything changed. The gold didn't do anything by itself. It just made me notice what I had trained myself to ignore. I didn't know most of the passwords to accounts that held my money. Russell got annoyed whenever I asked basic financial questions. The mortgage statements went to his email. The car he called ours was only in his name. When I asked how much we had in savings, he gave vague answers like, "Enough if we stay disciplined," or, "You don't need to stress about that." My money was family money. His decisions were private. One Friday evening, Russell came home in a strange mood. Too cheerful. Too calm. He brought in groceries, said he was making dinner, and told me to relax. That almost never happened. I thought maybe he was going to suggest a trip. Or bring up having kids again. He had been saying for years that we were almost financially ready, but he never explained what that meant. Every time I asked, he said I was turning it into pressure. We ate at the kitchen island. He poured wine. He asked about my day. He even laughed at something I said. Then he wiped his mouth with a napkin and said, "Tyler needs help." I immediately felt tired. Tyler was Russell's younger brother. He was always starting over. New job, new plan, new crisis, new explanation. This time, he wanted to start a roofing business. Russell said Tyler needed a used work truck, roofing equipment, and enough cash to clear old debt so he could do things right. I asked, "How much help are we talking?" Russell said, "Around 18. I thought he meant 1,800. Then he said, 18,000. I put my fork down. I said, do we even have $18,000 to loan him? Russell's face changed. Not into rage. Into annoyance. Like I had asked a stupid question. He said, that's why I handle this stuff. I told him I wasn't comfortable giving that much money without seeing our savings and talking it through. He leaned back and gave a small laugh. What, you don't trust me now? I said, I want to see the account. The air in the kitchen shifted. He said, you never cared about this before. I said, maybe I should have. He asked if my dad had been putting ideas in my head. I said this had nothing to do with my dad. That was a lie, and maybe my face showed it. Russell went still. He said, did your dad give you money? I said no too quickly. His eyes narrowed. What did he give you? I said, nothing you need to worry about. That was the wrong thing to say. He stood up slowly, pushed his chair back, and said, anything given to you during our marriage affects our household. I said, it was a family gift. He said, then why are you hiding it? I didn't answer because any honest answer would have broken everything open. Then he started searching. Not violently. Not dramatically. He didn't throw furniture or punch walls. He just walked from room to room opening drawers, closets, cabinets, and storage bins. He moved like our house was his inventory and I was the employee who misplaced something. I followed him upstairs, saying his name. He ignored me. He opened the guest room closet. My whole body went numb because that was where I had first hidden the case. He pulled down the winter decoration tote and dumped half of it onto the bed. Garland, ornaments, candles, stockings. The case wasn't there. I had moved it 2 days earlier to a locked cabinet at work because something in me had started to feel unsafe. I felt ridiculous doing it then. Paranoid. Dramatic. Watching Russell tear through that tote, I stopped feeling ridiculous. He looked at me and said, where is it? I said, stop. He said, this is exactly why I control the money. He said it low. Almost like a whisper. And that was the moment something inside me went cold. He didn't say, this is why I'm hurt. He didn't say, this is why I worry. He said control. Like it was normal. Like it was his job. Like one secret thing I had proved his right to control everything else. I slept in the guest room that night with the door locked. I didn't really sleep. I listened to him move around downstairs, opening cabinets, shutting drawers, muttering to himself. In the morning, he acted like I had caused all of it. He made coffee and said, are you ready to be honest now? I said, are you ready to show me the savings account? He looked disgusted. You're becoming just like your father. I packed a bag while he was in the shower. Clothes. Documents. A few sentimental things. I drove straight to my dad's house, but I couldn't get out right away. I sat in the driveway and cried until my chest hurt. When my dad opened the front door, he didn't ask what happened. He walked to my car, opened the door, and held me. I kept saying, I'm sorry. He said, you don't have to be sorry for needing help. That broke me. Later, I went to Brooke's apartment. She made tea, gave me the couch, and said, stay as long as you need. When I told her everything, she got quiet. Then she said, Natalie, that wasn't a marriage. That was a system. I wanted to defend Russell. Even then. I wanted to explain his stress, his childhood, his fear of debt, his mother's influence, his brother always needing help. I wanted to say he wasn't all bad. Because he wasn't. That's what makes it hard. Russell could be kind. He knew how I liked my coffee. He warmed my side of the bed in winter. He remembered hard dates and bought flowers without being asked. He could make me laugh until I forgot I was angry. But kindness between control makes you doubt yourself. It makes you think the problem is your tone, your timing, your sensitivity. The next week, I opened a bank account at a different bank. I redirected my paycheck there. I moved the gold into a safe deposit box. I didn't sell it. I didn't touch it. I just needed to know it was somewhere Russell couldn't reach. Then I met with a family lawyer named Jacqueline. I told myself I wasn't definitely leaving. I only needed to understand my situation. I needed someone calm to tell me what was real. The meeting was awful. Not because Jacqueline was unkind. She was direct, and I needed that. But every answer made me feel like I had been asleep in my own life. The emergency fund Russell always talked about was much smaller than I thought. There were bills I didn't know we had. There were accounts I couldn't access. Russell had a separate account in his name where he had been putting bonuses, reimbursements, and extra income from consulting work I didn't even know he was doing. It wasn't illegal. That almost made it worse. It wasn't some dramatic crime. It was ordinary. Quiet. Passwords. Paperwork. Small decisions made over years while I trusted him because he called it responsibility. Then we talked about the house. We bought it after we got married. I helped with repairs, furniture, groceries, property taxes, and monthly payments. I painted the guest room. I planted flowers by the front walk. I spent weekends sanding cabinets while Russell said we were building something together. But my name was not on the deed. Jacqueline explained that it didn't automatically mean I had no claim, especially because we were married and I had contributed, but it made everything harder. I felt humiliated. I kept thinking about all the times Russell called it our house, when something needed cleaning, paying, hosting, or fixing. But when paperwork mattered, somehow it was his house. I asked Jacqueline if I was stupid. She said no. You were trusting. I cried in her office. Quietly. I just couldn't stop. When I confronted Russell, I chose a coffee shop because I didn't want to be alone with him in the house. He looked exhausted when he walked in, and for a second, I almost felt guilty. He sat down and said, "Can we stop punishing each other now?" I said, "I know about the separate account." His face barely moved, but I saw the pause. Then he said, "That account is for stability." I asked, "Whose stability?" He sighed like I was being difficult. He said he kept it separate because I lacked discipline. He said if he told me about every account, I would panic and spend emotionally. He said he protected us from my anxiety. He said the house paperwork was done that way because he qualified faster and I was too stressed to deal with it. I said, "You let me pay for a house I'm not even on." He said, "You live there." I just stared at him. He realized how bad it sounded and softened his voice. He reached across the table, but I pulled my hand back. He said, "You're twisting everything." I said, "Show me the full records. Show me the mortgage paperwork. Add my name where it should be. Give me access to every account with marital money in it. Then maybe we can talk." His face hardened. "So now your dad gets to dictate our marriage?" I said, "My dad didn't make you hide money." He said, "Your dad gave you secret gold." I said, "Because he saw what I refused to see." That was when Russell got angry. Not loud, because we were in public. But his voice turned sharp. He said my family had always looked down on him. He said my dad humiliated him by giving me an escape fund. He said no husband would be okay with his wife hiding $25,000. He said I poisoned the marriage with secrecy. Part of me understood that. That's what made it hard. If a husband secretly took gold from his father and hid it from his wife, people would have questions. I had questions for myself. I still do. Secrets damage a marriage. I know that. But when I imagined telling Russell about the gold, I didn't imagine a conversation. I imagined him taking control of it. That told me enough. He leaned back and said, "So what? You're leaving me over money." I said, "No. I'm leaving because I had to hide money to feel like I could leave." For once, he had no answer. He looked scared. Not heartbroken. Not sorry. Scared. After that, everything got louder. Russell sent apology texts in the morning and angry texts at night. He said he loved me. Then he said I was greedy. Then he said we needed counseling. Then he said my father was manipulating me. Then he sent a long email about how marriage only works when both people stop keeping score. His mother, Beverly, called and said my dad had ruined a good marriage. I asked if she knew Russell had kept accounts from me. She said, "A man has to protect the household." I said, "From his wife." She didn't answer directly. She just said, "Your generation thinks every disagreement is abuse." That stayed with me because I used to think something close to that. I had judged women for staying, and I had judged women for leaving. Then I became one of them, and nothing felt simple anymore. Tyler called too. Russell had told him I was stopping him from helping family. I asked Tyler if he knew the $18,000 was supposed to come from savings I wasn't allowed to see. He went quiet. Then he said, "I didn't know it was like that." I believed him. Tyler had his problems, but he wasn't the one controlling my life. He was just the crisis that exposed the system. A few days later, Russell showed up at Brooke's apartment. She wouldn't let him in. I stood behind her in the hallway, hating myself for shaking. He looked past her and said, "Natalie, come home. We'll fix it." I asked if he brought the account records. He said, "This isn't how love works." I asked, "Then how does it work?" He said, "You don't threaten your husband with lawyers and secret gold." I said, "And you don't make your wife afraid to ask what's in her own bank account." He looked at Brooke and said, "Are you proud of this? Breaking up a marriage?" Brooke didn't flinch. She said, "No. I'm proud she finally knows she can leave one." He left after that. For 2 days, I felt strong. Then I crashed. Nobody tells you how much grief comes after clarity. Everyone talks about the moment you realize the truth like it's freedom, and it is. But it also hurts. Because once you see it, you have to mourn every version of your life where you didn't. I missed my house. My kitchen. My chipped mug. Our Sunday routine. Russell's hand on my back in crowded places. I missed the version of us I defended for years. And I hated that missing him made me feel weak. My dad told me it didn't. He said, "You can love someone and still not be safe with them." That was the first thing he said about Russell that didn't feel like judgment. It felt like permission. Jacqueline told me not to make emotional decisions. No selling the gold. No big withdrawals. No private agreements with Russell. Keep records. Communicate in writing. Breathe before responding. So that's what I did. I copied every document I could find. I printed bank statements. I gathered receipts for house repairs and payments. I changed passwords. I checked my credit. I started learning the financial life I should have understood years ago. It was embarrassing at first. I had to ask basic questions. I had to Google things I should have known. But every answer made the leash loosen a little. Russell eventually sent some records, but only after Jacqueline contacted him. Not because I asked. Not because he suddenly wanted to be transparent. Because someone official was now watching. That hurt more than I expected. I think part of me was waiting for him to wake up. To say, I see it now. I scared you. I controlled too much. I'm sorry. Not a perfect apology. Just something real. Instead, every apology came wrapped in blame. I'm sorry, but you lied first. I'm sorry, but your dad interfered. I'm sorry, but you never cared about finances before. I'm sorry, but I had to be the responsible one. The word "but" became the sound of my marriage dying. The strangest part is that the gold became less important over time. At first, it felt like the center of everything. The secret. The betrayal. The escape. But really, the gold was just a flashlight. It showed me the room I was already standing in. Russell didn't become controlling because of the gold. He was already controlling. I didn't become afraid because of the gold. I was already afraid. My dad didn't break my marriage. He gave me one thing Russell couldn't rename, redirect, or explain away. A few weeks after I left, I went back to the house with Brooke and my dad to pick up more of my things. Russell agreed to leave for 2 hours. Walking inside felt like stepping into a museum of a life that still looked normal. The couch. The framed photos. The plant by the window. The kitchen island where he had asked for $18,000 like he was asking to borrow a ladder. I went upstairs to the guest room and opened the closet. The winter decorations were shoved back into the tote, still messy from the night he searched it. I stood there looking at the stockings on top. Mine and Russell's. I picked mine up and almost cried. Not because I wanted him back in that moment, but because I remembered buying those stockings our first Christmas together. We were actually broke then. Cheap pasta, a tiny artificial tree, and big plans. Russell had been sweet that year. Gentle. Excited. I don't know when building a life turned into him holding the blueprint while I asked permission to see it. My dad came to the doorway and asked if I was okay. I said, I don't know. He nodded. That was the nice thing about my dad. He never demanded the right answer. I took my clothes, my documents, my grandmother's old recipe box, and the chipped mug from the kitchen. I left the stockings. A month later, Russell asked to meet again. This time, I brought Brooke and chose a cafe in Boise with people around and sunlight on everything. Russell looked thinner. He said he had started counseling on his own. He said he understood some of what he did was wrong. He said he wanted to add my name to the house and make the accounts transparent. 6 months earlier, I would have cried from relief. This time, I just listened. He said, I don't want to lose you. And I believed him. I believe Russell loves me in the way he understands love. I believe he misses me. I believe he is scared of losing the life we had. I even believe he might change some things because the consequences finally reached him. But he didn't change when I was crying. He didn't change when I asked questions. He didn't change when I said I felt small. He changed when I left. Maybe that still counts. Maybe that's how some people wake up. I don't know. I told him I wasn't moving back. Not now. Maybe not ever. I told him I needed legal separation for safety and clarity. I told him if he truly wanted to make things right, he could start by cooperating honestly instead of trying to pull me back emotionally. He cried. I had only seen Russell cry twice before. Seeing it should have broken me. It didn't. It made me sad, but it didn't move me. That was when I knew something inside me had changed. The gold is still in the safe deposit box. I haven't sold it. I hope I never have to. My paycheck goes into my own account now. I contribute to shared legal expenses only through documented transfers. I know my passwords. I know my balances. I know where my documents are. It sounds small, but it feels like breathing. Beverly still thinks my dad destroyed the marriage. Russell still says the gold was a betrayal. Some days, part of me agrees, and I hate that. Because yes, I hid something. I lied when he asked. I made a secret inside a marriage already full of secrets. But I keep coming back to one question. If I had told him the truth that first day, would he have protected me, or would he have taken control of the one thing that made me feel safe? I already know the answer. That's why I left. I'm not divorced yet. I'm not fully healed. I'm not some strong woman walking away with perfect confidence. I still cry in my car sometimes. I still almost text him when something funny happens. I still miss the version of my husband who warmed my side of the bed in winter. But I don't miss asking permission to exist. I don't miss shrinking every time I bought coffee. I don't miss being treated like a reckless child while my paycheck helped build a house I had no paperwork for. I don't miss being told I didn't understand money by the person who made sure I never got to see it. My dad told me a woman should not have to ask permission to survive. At the time, I thought he was warning me about Russell. Now I think he was reminding me about myself. So I guess this is my question, because I know people will disagree. Was I wrong for hiding the gold from my husband, or was that the only reason I finally saw the truth?